Hello and welcome to today's podcast. Thank you for joining me. And it is just me today. We've got some great guests coming up in the future. But for this week, I'm just going to talk to you about you. Because when we talk about having those very challenging and difficult conversations, especially the ones we've talked about in our Let's Talk About series, the Let's Talk About suicide, let's talk about loss, let's talk about grief. We're going to do some more on let's talk about parenting your parents for those people at a certain age, let's talk about being a parent, because that is one of the hardest jobs in the world. And all of those conversations have something in common, and that's us and how we as human beings operate in times of stress and in times of crisis. Now, I've had the privilege of talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of people in crisis. And I've also had the pleasure of being involved in learning people's stories. And I always believe that there is a lesson from each one of those stories. As a hostage and crisis negotiator, I'm just going to share with you three of the most powerful lessons that I learned. Number one is that we will all have a crisis at some stage in our life, sadly. Most crises involve some sort of loss. And when we experience that loss or the perception of loss or the fear of loss, it changes the way we communicate and behave. We go from our emotional state, our logical state to our emotional state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we can start to recognize what's happening in ourselves and then take a little bit of control back. The second one is that loneliness is one of the biggest killers in the UK, if not the world. And you don't have to live on your own to feel lonely. Often when we have a big challenge going on in our own minds or our own internal dialogue, or we're making big decisions, or we've got a lot of change going on, or we're dealing with something, we can feel quite isolated and lonely. Now, we know that talking helps because it helps us to put our thoughts into more of a logical perspective. When they're churning around in our head, it can cause our brain to become more in a crisis mode, more in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. I don't know what to do. And it can also make us very tunnel visioned. If you think of a time when things haven't gone so well in your own life, or maybe you're dealing with something and it's very challenging, perhaps very emotional for you, we become tunnel vision. We don't see the bigger picture, and that can cause a real sense of loneliness. And we can get this in roles of leadership, in parenting. I know I speak to a lot of parents and they say, do you know what? Parenting is really lonely. And if you read parenting forums, you can see the struggles that people are having managing their own feelings and bringing children up as well. So if you are a parent, my heart goes out to you, because parenting is an incredibly difficult job. And then the third one is we all have a story. And every one of you listening to this now or watching on YouTube, you have your own story. You are dealing with those things in your life, some of which you'll have shared with other people, but some of which you won't have shared with other people. And that will depend on how much you trust them. Yeah. We often have tip of the iceberg conversations, and those tip of the iceberg conversations are where we feel safe. And underneath that, there's a lot going on. There's our emotions, our values, our beliefs, what's just happened in our day. And all of this impacts on the way that we communicate and behave with each other. The reaction or the response you get from me will depend on where I am in my story. And depending on where you are on your story will be the reaction or the response that I get. Now, I'm going to share with you something that I often share with people, and that's this one sentence that really helped me to understand how to negotiate, how to have difficult conversations, how to manage conflict. I had the privilege of going over to Quantico to work with the FBI, and there was this amazing man on that FBI course. And he said this to me. He said, Nick, your job in life is not to change other people. Now, I know he's not the first person to say this. It goes all the way back. For those of you that listen to me regularly, you know that I love the Stoics and philosophy, and that I'll often quote Marcus Aurelius or Plato or Aristotle, because this isn't new. This is about us as human beings. And we learn and we develop it more. But he said, you can't change people. And yet we spend so much of our time trying to change people, trying to get them to see our point of view, try to get them to acknowledge that we are right, trying to get them to behave in a different way. And that can be your partner, that can be your kids, it could be your parents, it can be your friends. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to change people, and we can't. We definitely can't change their reaction. The only thing that we have any control over is how we choose to respond. And I choose the word respond deliberately because responding is from the logical brain, reacting is from your emotional brain. And often when we have difficult conversations, often when we're dealing with a challenge, when we're dealing with grief, when we're dealing with loss, when we're talking about suicide, all of those things, we're in an emotional state. And we don't have that logical choice of responding, and will often react. Now, there's a great book called The Chimp Paradox, where there is a description of the chimp brain, the emotional brain, and saying it's 5 times stronger than the logical brain. So you're fighting that instinct, that fight, flight, or freeze instinct when you're feeling under threat, when you're feeling challenged, when you're in your emotional state. And it's about recognizing how do you, if we only have control over how we respond, but most of the time react, Nick, how can I change that? Now, the thing is, when we're in times of grief, times of immense emotion, it's going to be harder, and all of that's okay. What I'm going to give you is a little tip to help you to manage yourself, especially if you have those conflicting, challenging conversations coming up. How can you control you? So now we know we can't control all the people. The only thing we can do is control us. The first thing is to become more conscious. So, number one, become more conscious of that physical reaction. And you can do this really quickly. A quick exercise is to think of a person that you don't get on with, and they send you an email, or they say they want to see you, or they phone you up, and you immediately have a physical reaction. What is that physical reaction? Where do you feel it? For me, I feel it across my shoulders or in the pit of my stomach. I can physically feel my heart racing a little bit faster, and also sweaty palms. They're my physical feelings. As soon as I feel that, I'm now consciously more aware, and I'm like, I'm being triggered. Something here is triggering me because I am reacting physically. So now I know I'm reacting physically. Now I know that I can do something. And the more conscious you become of this, the easier it is to put a strategy in place where you don't react. Now, there's something called the 90-second rule. There's research done by a lady called Dr. Taylor Bolt, where they found that the emotions come in 90 seconds. So if you cannot react for 90 seconds, your brain has a better chance of becoming more logical, and you can respond. So we have a strategy, and the strategy could be as simple as walking away. It could be, oh, hang on a sec. I'm recognizing my physical reaction here. I'm going to walk away. I don't want to be part of this conversation. And we can just say that. We can be really open and honest and say, I'm just going to stop the conversation. I am recognizing in myself that I'm starting to react. That's not fair on you or me. So I'm going to remove myself from this situation, and I'll come back to you when I've reflected a bit more and I'm in a bit better position to have a good conversation with you. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Sometimes we're worried about what other people think of us, but this is about you. Don't worry about them. They're already caught up in their own world and worrying about what people think of them. So don't worry about that. Or you could have a strategy in a difficult conversation. Perhaps the conversation is taking a turn that you weren't expecting. And so we can physically feel ourselves reacting and say, well, now we're like, okay, I need to buy myself a bit of time here. What can I do? Well, I don't know about you, but we've been talking for quite a long time. Shall I go and put the kettle on? Great distraction, especially in the UK. We love a cup of tea over everything. So you can have a distraction. If your teenager is driving you bonkers, or your partner is driving you mad, and you're having a big emotional conversation, press the pause button. As soon as you feel that physical reaction, you can't control them, remember. You can say lots of different things to them, but you can't control them. The only thing you can control is you. walk away. Buy yourself some time to get yourself back into that logical space. For me personally, as soon as I feel that physical reaction, I stop myself from talking and I'll do this. And that is a sign for me that I need to shut up, be quiet, don't say anything, Nick, because if you do, you're going to react. And if I react, the other person is probably likely to also react. And then we end up in this situation, it's called Batari's box, where your attitude affects your behavior affects my attitude, affects my behavior. So we can control us. So we press the big pause button and we stop that conversation. And the more conscious you become of this, the more aware you become of your own emotions. And it's great to have emotions and recognize them and allow yourself to go with them. And that will help you. It's my top tip. If you have in any way been affected by today's podcast episode, there are numbers at the end of the transcript which you can contact. We'd like to thank you all for listening. And if you'd like to join our Facebook group, there is also a link to that in the notes that go with this podcast. Have a great day.